Don't buy these 5 toxic Canadian whiskey brands. Buy these 5 brands instead. Is the Canadian whiskey in your glass clean craft or quietly toxic for your body and wallet? Alcohol already stresses your liver and raises long-term health risks. Add cheap blends, sugar-heavy finishes, and minimum aging, and the damage compounds. Today we expose 5 toxic Canadian whiskeys and 5 that are made with real discipline and control. 5. Canadian Mist. If you're drinking Canadian Mist because it feels smooth, ask yourself why it feels that way. This brand has been around since 1967, and it produces whiskey at a massive industrial scale. When something is made in huge volume, the goal becomes efficiency. Corn-heavy mash bills lower cost. Used barrels reduce intensity. Heavy filtration removes texture. What you're left with is a light spirit that goes down easy and disappears fast. That easy feeling is exactly the point. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't slow you down. It doesn't demand attention. And when alcohol feels soft and neutral, people tend to drink more of it without noticing. Alcohol already stresses your liver. It already raises long-term health risks. A thinner whiskey that feels harmless can quietly increase intake simply because it feels light. Then there's the scale. Massive corn farming, high water use, large transport chains. Industrial production isn't romantic. It's efficient. And efficiency in alcohol usually means volume over character. This isn't about contamination. It's about intention. Canadian Mist is built to move cases, not to build depth. It works in a mixer. It works at parties. It works when you're not paying attention. But when you sip it neat, the weakness shows. There's no backbone, no real weight, just mild sweetness and quick burn. You call it smooth. The question is whether smooth equals quality or just dilution. And if you think thin whiskey is disappointing, the next bottle hides its shortcuts behind sweetness, and that makes the problem louder. Fear 4. Crown Royal Maple or Flavored Expressions. Crown Royal built its name on heritage since 1939. Canadian blended whiskey, velvet bag, heavy glass. That image signals quality before you even open the bottle. But the maple and other flavored versions shift the focus away from the whiskey itself and towards sweetness. And that shift matters. These bottles sit at 40% alcohol like standard Canadian whiskey, but the flavoring changes the experience completely. Maple dominates, honey dominates, apple dominates. The sweetness hits first and stays. It feels smooth because sugar softens the edges. It feels easy because the spice is muted. But when sweetness leads the profile, the base spirit fades into the background. Flavored expressions use added flavor compounds to create a consistent taste every time. Consistency sells, predictability sells. But the trade-off is depth. Rye spice becomes lighter. Oak character becomes secondary. Grain identity becomes less noticeable. What should taste like aged whiskey starts tasting like a sweetened drink with alcohol behind it. Sweetness also changes behavior. When alcohol tastes sugary and mild, people tend to sip faster. The burn feels softer. The warning signs feel lower. Alcohol already carries clear health risks, including liver strain and increased long-term disease risk. A sweeter profile can make intake feel lighter than it actually is. Marketing calls these bottles approachable and beginner-friendly. That framing targets impulse buyers. It encourages quick approval. It encourages easy repetition. But sweetness does not equal craftsmanship. Prestige image, added flavor, reduced structure. It's about dilution of identity. And if you think sweetness hides the problem well, the next bottle reveals how stripping flavor entirely can create an even bigger issue. Gibson's Finest, certain low-tier bottlings. Gibson's Finest carries a long history, dating back to the 19th century, and that history creates trust. People see the name and assume quality has been preserved across every bottle. That assumption deserves a closer look. Not every expression under this label reflects the same depth or aging care that built its early reputation. The lower-tier bottlings, especially entry blends at 40% alcohol, lean heavily on lighter corn-based spirit. Corn softens flavor and keeps costs manageable, but it also reduces intensity. Rye, which gives Canadian whiskey its spice and structure, often plays a smaller role in these versions. The result feels mild and easy, yet thin on the palate. When flavor fades quickly and leaves little behind, the experience feels flat rather than refined. Canadian law requires whiskey to age at least 3 years in wood. Some entry releases stay close to that minimum. Less time in barrel means less interaction with oak. Less oak interaction means fewer developed notes like caramel, spice, and layered warmth. Instead of depth, you get simple sweetness and short finishes. That style works in mixed drinks, but it struggles when poured neat. Large-scale blending focuses on uniform taste year after year. Consistency protects the brand image, yet it also smooths away distinct personality. When every bottle tastes nearly identical, there is little excitement or evolution. Reviews often describe these blends as easy or inoffensive. Those words signal safety, not enthusiasm. Alcohol already carries well-documented health risks. A lighter, easy-drinking profile can encourage quicker pours and higher consumption without much reflection. That pattern increases intake over time. Historic branding, accessible price, limited complexity. If mild and predictable feel underwhelming, the next whiskey shifts attention toward aggressive novelty that creates an entirely different set of concerns. 2. Lesser-known budget blends, unverified bottom-shelf bottles. This is where things get quieter on the label and louder in reality. These are the bottles with maple leaves, bold patriotic names, and prices that look almost too good to question. Canadian Reserve, Northern Select, Premium Blend. The words sound official. The packaging looks respectable. The cost makes it easy to grab without thinking twice. Canadian whiskey law requires a minimum of 3 years in wood and at least 40% alcohol by volume. That is the baseline. Many ultra-budget blends stay right at that baseline. 3 years in used barrels, high corn content, very little rye character. The result is technically whiskey, but only just. The flavor feels thin. The finish disappears quickly. What remains is alcohol warmth and faint sweetness. These bottles are usually produced by large contract distillers who supply multiple private labels. Massive blending tanks combine spirit from different batches to create something consistent. Consistent means safe. Safe means neutral. Neutral means forgettable. You are not tasting craft. You are tasting efficiency. They are built for mixing. Cola covers the sharpness. Ginger ale hides the flat body. Ice dulls the burn. That is the intention. Keep flavor simple so it does not clash with sugar and carbonation. When the mixer becomes the main flavor, the whiskey underneath stops mattering. Transparency is limited. No clear mash bill, no detailed aging notes, no barrel information beyond what the law requires. Just branding and a price tag that looks convenient. Low cost, minimum aging, maximum volume. Alcohol still carries known health risks. A thin whiskey that feels easy to drink can increase how much you pour without noticing. And if you think this is the lowest point, the number 1 bottle combines strong branding with decisions that raise even more serious concerns. 1. Crown Royal Texas Mesquite or Odd Limited Editions. Crown Royal is one of the most recognized whiskey names in Canada. The velvet pouch, the heavy glass bottle, the long history dating back to 1939. That image builds trust before the cork even comes out. But some limited editions, including Texas Mesquite and other experimental finishes, show how strong branding can carry bottles that struggle on flavor. Texas Mesquite was marketed around smoked wood influence and bold character. Smoking barrels or using unusual finishing methods sounds exciting. It sounds different. But when heavy smoke or artificial flavor notes dominate the profile, the base whiskey becomes secondary. Instead of tasting rye grain, oak, and age development, you taste the finish first and almost nothing underneath it. On review platforms such as WhiskeyBase and aggregated consumer rating sites, certain novelty expressions have scored noticeably lower than standard Crown Royal releases. Lower average ratings signal consistent disappointment across large groups of drinkers. This is not one isolated opinion. It reflects a pattern. When finish overshadows structure, balance suffers. Limited editions also introduce inconsistency. Different batches can vary in intensity, sweetness, or smoke level. One bottle may feel aggressive, another may feel flat. That variation weakens consumer trust. When buyers cannot predict quality, confidence drops. In spirits, predictability and structure matters more than novelty and flavor. Alcohol already carries known health risks, including liver strain and long-term disease correlation. When flavor masking makes whiskey taste sweeter or smokier than its structure supports, people may overlook strength and consume more than intended. That pattern increases intake without much reflection. These bottles are not chemically unsafe. The concern lies in execution and intention. Novelty attracts attention. Attention drives sales. Sales do not guarantee depth. Prestige packaging, experimental finishes, uneven results. When whiskey feels like a marketing experiment rather than careful maturation, the experience loses weight. And after seeing how gimmicks distort balance, the safer brands ahead show what controlled aging and focused craftsmanship actually look like. All the bottles above chased shortcuts, thin blends, minimum aging. When alcohol already stresses the liver and increases long-term health risks, adding poor quality production and sugar-loaded flavoring only makes it worse. But not every Canadian whiskey follows that path. Here are 5 brands that actually reshaped a craft. 5. 40 Creek. 40 Creek was founded in 1992 in Ontario and quickly built a reputation for small batch blending rather than massive industrial output. That difference matters. Smaller batch production allows tighter control over barrel selection and blending ratios. Instead of chasing extreme novelty, 40 Creek focuses on layered flavor. The distillery often ages its corn, rye, and barley whiskey separately before blending. That technique creates more defined structure. You taste oak, you taste spice, you taste caramel notes that come from proper maturation rather than artificial additions. It is bottled at 40% ABV, meeting Canadian standards, but many expressions show more depth than budget blends at the same strength. 40 Creek Confederation Oak Reserve, for example, uses Canadian oak barrels that add stronger vanilla and toasted wood character. That additional oak contact increases perceived richness and mouthfeel. The whiskey feels fuller, not syrupy, not masked. Importantly, 40 Creek does not rely on sugar-driven flavor extensions to attract buyers. No maple gimmicks, no candy-style finishes, just aged grain spirit interacting with wood. That reduces unnecessary additives and keeps the profile closer to traditional whiskey production. Alcohol is never health food, but cleaner production, restrained blending, and honest aging create a safer choice compared to highly sweetened or aggressively processed alternatives. Fewer shortcuts mean fewer compromises. Craft-focused, barrel-driven, flavor built through time. And while 40 Creek delivers solid balance and integrity, the next brand raises the bar even higher with longer aging and deeper complexity that truly separates itself. 4. J.P. Wiser's 18-year-old. J.P. Wiser's has been part of Canadian whiskey history since 1857, and the 18-year-old expression represents one of its most mature and structured releases. 18 years in oak is not marketing language. It is time. Canadian law requires a minimum of 3 years aging. This bottle rests 6 times longer than that baseline. Time in wood changes everything. Extended aging allows deeper interaction between spirit and barrel. Oak compounds like vanillin and tannins develop gradually, creating layered notes of caramel, dried fruit, baking spice, and toasted wood. Instead of sharp ethanol heat, you get integration. Alcohol softens, flavor concentrates. The texture becomes heavier and more cohesive. The mash bill leans on corn for body and rye for spice, a classic Canadian structure. But with 18 years in cask, those grains do not taste thin or neutral. They taste developed. Oxidation over nearly 2 decades rounds harsh edges and builds complexity that younger blends cannot replicate. Bottled at 40% ABV, it stays within traditional Canadian proof levels, yet the depth feels stronger than the number suggests. That is because maturation builds density without increasing alcohol content. It drinks smoother, but not flatter. There is backbone. Critics often note its balanced finish, where oak dryness meets subtle sweetness without tipping into syrupy territory. That balance matters for those who sip neat rather than bury whiskey in mixers. Alcohol still carries health risks. No bottle erases that reality. But longer aging and disciplined blending reduce the need for flavor masking or gimmick finishes. It is whiskey shaped by patience, not shortcuts. Matured properly, structured carefully, complexity earned through time. And if 18 years feels impressive, the next brand takes bold rye character and intensity to an even higher level of craftsmanship. 3. Canadian Club Invitation Series. 18-year-old High Proof Canadian Club's Invitation Series 18-year-old High Proof is the kind of whiskey that makes you reconsider what Canadian whiskey can do when time, wood, and intention are aligned. This is not a casual bottle. This is an invitation to experience complexity, heritage, and craft distilled into every drop. First, let's talk about age and proof. At 18 years in oak, this expression has spent 6 times the legal minimum for Canadian whiskey sitting in barrel, developing layers of character most mass blends never see. Aging is slow chemistry. Wood and spirit interact over years, smoothing edges, creating nuance, and building depth. That's why an 18-year-old rarely tastes like a younger blend. It tastes older, not in a dusty way, but in a way that signals maturity. Then there's the proof. At higher alcohol strength than standard Canadian blends, this whiskey has more structural backbone. Higher proof means more of the spirit's natural compounds carry through to your palate. You feel oiliness, spice, and wood influence differently. It's not hot, it's defined. Canadian Club mastered this interplay by combining rye's spice with corn's body and barley's malt influence. The result is not a one-dimensional whiskey. You get toasted oak on the nose, layered with dried fruit, subtle baking spice, and sweet vanilla. On the palate, the heat is measured, not overwhelming, and it supports rather than obscures flavor. Critics and whiskey lovers alike praise this bottling for balance. In many blind tastings, Invitation Series performs strongly against whiskeys twice its price. And while no whiskey, no matter how aged, is healthy, choosing a well-crafted, properly aged spirit reduces the feeling of harshness that younger budget blends often deliver. That matters. It changes the drinking experience from quick burn to contemplative sip. Alcohol affects people differently. No bottle removes risk. But high-proof, well-aged whiskey feels more like an occasion than a numbing shot. Slow-aged, bold character, balanced complexity. And while this bottle exemplifies depth, the next one on our list takes archive heritage and elevates it to something almost legendary. 2. Crown Royal Reserve, aged 12 years. Crown Royal Reserve aged 12 years is one of the most respected Canadian whiskeys, and for good reason. This bottle represents a step up from basic blends, not just in age but in craftsmanship. 12 years in oak barrels means the spirit has had time to draw complexity from wood, developing layers of flavor that younger expressions simply cannot achieve. The extended barrel time allows natural reactions between spirit and wood to unfold. Tannins soften, vanillin develops, fruit and spice notes emerge. What starts as raw grain spirit gradually transforms into something richer, deeper, and more coherent. That is the magic of patience, and Crown Royal harnesses it well here. Unlike many entry-level blends, Reserve aged 12 years isn't trying to hide behind sweetness, gimmicks, or flavor additives. It stands on its own character. The aroma opens with toasted oak and rich vanilla. On the palate, caramel and baking spices mingle with gentle rye warmth. The finish is measured rather than abrupt, letting each layer settle instead of rushing away. At 40% alcohol by volume, this whiskey meets traditional Canadian standards, but its personality feels much more complete than many competitors in the same proof range. That completeness matters. When a whiskey tastes balanced and integrated, it feels smoother, not because it is watered down, but because its components work in harmony. Critics and whiskey enthusiasts often praise this expression for its consistency and depth, and it frequently appears on best-of Canadian whiskey lists. In blind tastings, its age and structure help it hold its own against offerings at higher price points. Alcohol always carries risk. No bottle makes drinking safe. But choosing a well-crafted, properly aged whiskey delivers an experience that respects tradition and flavor rather than masking shortcomings. Aged with intent, balanced with experience, complexity earned through time. And while this 12-year reserve delivers refinement, the next whiskey takes Canadian rye boldness and elevates it to arguably the highest expression of craft in the country. 1. Alberta Premium Cask Strength 100% Rye. Alberta Premium Cask Strength 100% Rye is not just another Canadian whiskey. It is one of the few 100% rye whiskeys in North America, made by Alberta distillers in Calgary from prairie-grown rye grain. The result is a spirit built entirely from rye, not corn-heavy bases that dominate many Canadian blends. This expression is bottled at cask strength, around 63.7 to 66% ABV, which means it leaves the barrel without significant dilution, preserving more of the spirit's natural oils, rye spice, and wood influence. That bold alcohol level is not for instant shots. It demands slow sipping, contemplation, and respect. Experts and enthusiasts have noticed its impact. According to Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible 2021, this rye was dubbed World Whiskey of the Year, crowned Whiskey Wonder of the World from among hundreds of global competitors. That kind of recognition is rare for Canadian whiskey. In the glass, expect caramel and vanilla balanced with rye spice and black currant notes, with a palate profile that evolves across each sip. The finish is long and spicy rather than quick and flat. Many reviewers describe deep flavor complexity, pepper, oak, dried fruit, and subtle sweetness that builds rather than disperses. Because it is 100% rye and cask strength, this whiskey provides a more robust experience than lighter blends commonly found on shelves. Its structure and depth rewards slow enjoyment, making it suitable for neat sipping or contemplative tasting sessions. Alcohol always carries inherent health impacts. No whiskey can be labeled healthy But choosing a well-crafted, high-integrity spirit like this limits the ambiguities found in cheaper, highly blended alternatives. A whiskey that tastes like whiskey, not additives or gimmicks, feels far more respectful of tradition and palate. Bold, complex, full-bodied. And if this intense rye feels commanding, the next whiskey on this list brings even greater refinement and time-earned balance. If this breakdown helped you rethink what's in your glass, subscribe. We're just getting started exposing what brands don't say.